There are moments when you find yourself haunted by a name, a face, a memory. No matter how much time passes, their presence lingers like the last note of a song that refuses to fade. You tell yourself that time will heal, that one day you will wake up and feel nothing. Yet, that day never seems to come. You go about your daily life, convincing yourself that you have moved on, but then, a familiar scent in the air, the melody of an old song, or the way a stranger speaks their name suddenly brings everything rushing back. In that fleeting moment, the past feels closer than ever, as if no time has passed at all. It is as if they are still with you, whispering through the corridors of your mind. Why do some people remain embedded in our hearts, even when they are no longer in our lives? Why do feelings persist even when reason tells us they should not? Some might say it's because of love, because they were special, irreplaceable. Others claim it's attachment, an unfinished story, or the longing for closure. But what if the answer lies deeper? What if the reason you cannot let go is not about them at all, but about something within you? Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. But what happens when the attachment is to something that no longer exists? A memory, a moment in time, a version of yourself that lived in their presence. Then, the suffering is not just deep, it is endless. It loops like an uncompleted song, a story without an ending, a candle still burning long after the night has passed. And yet, despite this suffering, we hesitate to release our grip, because in holding on, we believe we are preserving something precious, proof that the love, the connection, the shared moments were real. But is it truly love we are holding on to, or merely the illusion of it? To understand why you still have feelings for them, you must look beyond the illusion of the mind, beyond the stories you tell yourself, and into the true nature of attachment. Because the truth is, you are not trapped by them, you are trapped by the meaning you have assigned to them. Let me take you into a story that will reveal the hidden truth, one that will change how you see love, loss, and lingering emotions forever. The illusion of attachment, the story of the traveler and the flute. There was once a traveler who had wandered for days, searching for answers. His heart was heavy with sorrow, his mind trapped in memories of someone he could not let go of. Every step he took was burdened by longing. Every breath was filled with the echoes of the past. No matter how far he walked, he could not escape the presence of someone who no longer stood beside him. At last, his journey brought him to a distant temple, nestled deep within the mountains, where an old master resided, a monk known for his wisdom and understanding of the human heart. The traveler, weary from his journey, bowed deeply before the master and spoke. "Master, I cannot seem to let go. There was someone I loved deeply, yet they are gone from my life. Still, my heart clings to them as if they are right beside me. I know I must move on, but my feelings do not listen to reason. Why does my heart refuse to let them go?" The master, with eyes filled with kindness, smiled gently and asked, "Do you play the flute?" The traveler, caught off guard by the question, frowned. "No, master, I do not." Without another word, the master walked to a wooden shelf, picked up an old flute, and held it up to his lips. But instead of playing a note, he simply moved his fingers over the holes, as if playing a silent melody. His hands danced over the instrument with the grace of a musician lost in song, yet the air remained still, empty of sound. After a few moments, the master lowered the flute and turned to the traveler. "Do you hear the song?" The traveler shook his head. "No, master, there is no sound." The master placed the flute down and nodded. "Yet, if I had played this same melody in front of someone who once knew the song, they would hear it in their mind, even in the silence." The traveler's eyes widened in realization. "But how is that possible?" The master smiled. "Because the song is not in the flute. The song is in the mind of the one who remembers it. The mind's illusion of holding on." The traveler sat in silence, contemplating the master's words. A gentle breeze passed through the temple, stirring the wind chimes that hung from the eaves. their soft tones fading into the vast emptiness of the mountains beyond. At last, the traveler spoke again. Are you saying that my feelings do not come from them, but from within me? The master nodded. Exactly. You believe you still have feelings for them because they were the source of your happiness. But in truth, your mind is simply playing a melody that no longer exists outside of you. The song you hear now is not theirs, it is yours. The traveler's brow furrowed in thought. But master, if the song is mine, why can't I stop playing it? The master took a deep breath and gestured toward the garden outside. Look at the water. The traveler followed his gaze and saw a small pond, its surface reflecting the sky above. The master continued, if you throw a stone into the water, the ripples will spread. If you throw many stones, the water will continue to move long after the stones have sunk. Your feelings are the ripples, and your past experiences with them were the stones. You keep replaying memories, throwing more stones, and wondering why the water does not become still. The traveler sighed. Then how do I still the water? The master smiled. By no longer throwing stones. The traveler looked back at the pond. The surface was calm now, untouched by ripples. For the first time, he understood. The pain he carried was not because the person was still present in his life, but because his own mind refused to stop replaying the song. It was not the presence of the other person that caused his suffering, but his resistance to their absence. Letting go of the unfinished melody. The master sat beside the traveler, his voice gentle yet firm. You believe that if you let go, you will lose something precious. But the truth is, you are not holding on to them. You are holding on to the version of yourself that existed when they were near. You are chasing an echo, trying to grasp a shadow. The traveler looked down at his hands as if he had been holding something invisible all along. So, what must I do? The master placed a hand on his shoulder. You must realize that you are not chained to them. You are chained to a memory, and memories are nothing but thoughts. A thought only has power if you believe it. The traveler closed his eyes, listening to the wind. For the first time in a long while, he did not fight against the silence. He let the memory drift like a note in the air, fading, dissolving, becoming part of the stillness. And in that moment, he understood. He did not have to forget the song. He only had to stop trying to hear it. The nature of memory and attachment. The traveler sat in silence, contemplating the master's words. His heart wrestled with the truth he had just heard. If the song, the lingering feelings, were not truly about the other person but a melody his own mind kept playing, then why was it so hard to silence? Why did the echoes of the past feel so real, so persistent, as if they had a life of their own? Finally, he asked, are you saying that my feelings do not come from them, but from within me? The master nodded, his eyes reflecting the stillness of the present moment. Exactly. You believe you still have feelings for them because they were the source of your happiness. But in truth, your mind is simply playing a melody that no longer exists outside of you. The song you hear now is not theirs, it is yours. The traveler frowned, his hands clenched as if trying to grasp something invisible. But master, if the song is mine, why can't I stop playing it? The master took a deep breath and pointed to a pond just outside the temple, where the surface shimmered under the golden afternoon sun. The traveler followed his gaze, watching as a light breeze caused gentle ripples to dance across the water. Look at the water, the master said. If you throw a stone into it, the ripples will spread. If you throw many stones, the water will continue to move long after the stones have sunk. The traveler watched the pond closely. Your feelings, the master continued, are the ripples. Your past experiences with them were the stones. Each time you replay a memory, you are throwing another stone into the water, disturbing the stillness, and then you wonder why the surface does not become calm. The traveler's expression darkened with realization. How many times had he done this? How many nights had he lain awake, revisiting old conversations, reliving moments that could never return. How often had he let a scent, a place, or a stray word send him spiraling back into the past, allowing the ripples to spread once more? The master observed his turmoil but remained quiet, allowing the weight of understanding to settle in. At last, the traveler sighed, his voice tinged with both exhaustion and longing. "Then how do I still the water?" The master smiled, a smile filled with both wisdom and kindness. "By no longer throwing stones." The traveler's breath caught in his throat. Could it really be that simple? Could the key to peace be as effortless as choosing not to disturb the water? The trap of replaying the past. The master turned and walked toward the pond, gesturing for the traveler to follow. Together, they stood at its edge, gazing at the reflection of the sky above. "Tell me," the master said, "if you were standing here, waiting for the water to become still, how long would it take?" The traveler hesitated. "It depends. If I stop throwing stones, it will eventually settle on its own." The master nodded. "Precisely. The problem is not the water itself. The problem is your habit of disturbing it. And so it is with the mind." The traveler exhaled slowly. He understood now. He had spent so much time revisiting the past that he had never given his heart the chance to rest. Every time he thought he was moving on, he had unknowingly cast another stone, stirring the pain once more. Breaking free from the illusion. The master picked up a small pebble and held it out in his palm. The memories will always exist, just as this stone exists. But what you do with it is your choice. You can keep throwing it into the water, keeping the pain alive, or you can simply set it down and walk away. The traveler watched as the master gently placed the stone back onto the earth beside the pond. "Let the past remain where it belongs," the master said, "not buried, not erased, but at peace." For the first time, the traveler felt something shift within him, a lightness, a sense of clarity he had not known in years. He looked down at the pond once more. Though the surface still carried the memory of past ripples, he now understood. The water does not need to be forced into stillness. It will settle naturally, if only he allows it. The symbolic nature of attachment. Many believe that when we have feelings for someone, it is because they are special, irreplaceable. We convince ourselves that they were different from everyone else, that what we shared with them was unique. And perhaps, in some ways, it was. But Zen wisdom reveals something deeper. You still have feelings for them not because of who they are, but because of the meaning you assigned to them. They were not just a person to you. They were a symbol of love, of joy, of something you believed you needed. The mind does not hold on to people, it holds on to symbols. Think about it. If you have ever lost someone, whether through distance, time, or the natural course of life, you may find that it is not just the person you miss, it is the way you felt when you were with them. You do not long for their presence as much as you long for the version of yourself that existed in their presence. The happiness, the security, the feeling of being loved, these are the things you are truly grieving. Imagine a candle. If someone gave you a candle during the darkest night of your life, you would cherish it. That single flame would have been your source of warmth, comfort, and reassurance when everything around you was consumed by darkness. The candle, though simple, would have felt like a lifeline. And even long after the night has passed, you may still carry that candle with you, afraid of letting it go, because what if the darkness returns? What if you need that light again? But here is the truth, it is no longer night. The dawn has arrived, and yet, you still cling to the candle as if the darkness remains. You are holding on not because of love, but because of fear of losing the light they once provided. Fear of stepping into the unknown without them. But tell me, if the sun has risen, do you still need to carry a candle? The traveler sat in silence, absorbing the master's words. He had believed that his inability to let go meant that this person was too important to forget, too special to release. But now, he saw it clearly. He had not been holding on to them. He had been holding on to what they represented. And perhaps, the time had come to let the candle rest, not because it was worthless, but because the light he once sought from them could now be found within himself. The path to freedom, letting go. The traveler looked down at his hands as if he had been holding something invisible all along. His fingers, though empty, felt heavy, as if carrying the weight of something that no longer existed. The realization unsettled him. Master, if my feelings are an illusion of my own mind, does that mean I never truly loved them? The master shook his head, his gaze gentle but firm. No, my child, love was real, but love is like the wind, it touches you, changes you, but it cannot be grasped. What you are holding now is not love, but a shadow of what once was. The traveler's breath caught in his throat. He had spent so long believing that his inability to let go was proof of love's depth. But what if he had been mistaken? What if what he clung to was no longer love, but merely the echo of a song that had already ended? He took a deep breath and asked, "Then what must I do?" The master placed a reassuring hand on the traveler's shoulder. "You must realize that you are not chained to them. You are chained to a memory. And memories are nothing but thoughts. A thought only has power if you believe it." The traveler closed his eyes, letting the master's words sink in. He had spent so much time believing he was trapped in his emotions, when in truth, it was his mind that had built the walls. "But how do I break free?" The master smiled and gestured toward the sky. "Tell me, if you release a bird from a cage, where does it go?" The traveler hesitated. "It flies away." The master nodded. "Exactly, but what if the cage was never locked?" The traveler's eyes widened. "Then, the bird could have left at any time." The master's smile deepened. "And so could you." The illusion of chains. The traveler looked back at his own suffering, replaying the countless times he had convinced himself he could not move on. The sleepless nights, the longing, the constant replaying of the past, it had all felt so real. But what if it had been nothing more than an illusion? "Master," he said hesitantly, "if I am not chained to them, then why does it feel as though I am?" The master picked up a thin rope from the ground and wrapped it gently around the traveler's wrist, tying it loosely. "Do you feel bound?" he asked. The traveler shook his head. "No, master, the rope is barely touching me." "And yet," the master continued, "if I told you that this rope is unbreakable, that it will keep you tied to this spot forever, you might believe me, and if you believe it, you will never try to free yourself, even though all you must do is lift your hand." The traveler stared at the rope. With a simple motion, he could remove it. The realization sent a shiver through him. "Your suffering," the master said softly, "is not because you are truly bound. It is because you have convinced yourself that you are." The traveler's breath trembled. "So the cage was never locked?" The master nodded. "No, my child, it never was." Walking away from the cage. For the first time in what felt like forever, the traveler allowed himself to imagine a life beyond the sorrow, a life where he was no longer haunted by the past, where he no longer carried the weight of someone who had already walked away. "But master," he asked, "if I let go, does that mean I will forget them?" The master shook his head. "Letting go is not about erasing the past. It is about no longer letting the past control your present." The traveler looked down at the loose rope around his wrist. He lifted his hand, and it slipped away effortlessly. A laugh, light and unexpected, escaped his lips. He had been carrying his suffering for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be free. "You were never truly chained," the master said. "You only believed you were." The traveler turned toward the open road, feeling lighter than he had in years. The memories still existed, but they no longer weighed him down. They were no longer walls, they were just passing clouds in the vast sky of his mind. And for the first time, he realized he did not have to hold on to the past to honor what once was. He only had to step forward. Letting go and returning to yourself. Days later, the traveler stood on a hill, looking out at the vast sky. The horizon stretched endlessly before him, the clouds drifting without resistance, the wind carrying whispers of a world that continued to move. He took a deep breath, allowing the cool air to fill his lungs, and then exhaled slowly. For the first time, he did not try to chase the wind. For the first time, he did not try to hold on. And in that stillness, he realized something. He was free. Not because the feelings had disappeared, but because he had stopped believing that they were a prison. For so long, he had thought that letting go meant forcing himself to forget, erasing the love, the memories, the person who had once meant everything. He had resisted moving on because he believed it would mean losing something precious, something irreplaceable. But now, standing here, he understood the truth. Letting go was not about forgetting. It was about seeing clearly. He watched as a bird soared high above, its wings open wide, carried effortlessly by the same wind that once felt like a storm in his heart. He had spent so long trying to fight the currents of his emotions, trying to cling to something that had already passed. But now, he understood, his suffering had never come from love itself, but from his own refusal to let love transform into something new. Love, he realized, was never meant to be grasped. It was meant to be felt, cherished, and then released, like a song carried by the wind. Beautiful not because it is held onto, but because it is free to move, to change, to exist beyond possession. For so long, he had thought that moving on meant losing something. But now, as he stood in the vast openness of the present moment, he realized he had gained something far greater. He had returned to himself. He had spent so much time looking back, longing for something outside of him, believing that happiness was tied to another person, another moment in time. But happiness was never in the past. Happiness was never in someone else. It had always been within him. The traveler smiled. He was no longer waiting for an answer, for closure, for something or someone to release him, because he had done it himself. Not by forgetting. Not by forcing himself to move on. But by understanding that he had never been trapped to begin with. He turned away from the past, not in resistance, but in peace. With steady steps, he walked forward, no longer a prisoner of memory, but a traveler once more, open, present, and free. You still have feelings for them because your mind continues to play an old song, one that once brought you comfort, one that you fear will be lost if you let go. But what happens when you stop trying to hear it? Silence. And in that silence, peace. Letting go is not about losing someone, it is about returning to yourself. For so long, you have believed that your pain is proof of love, that holding on is the only way to honor what once was. But here is the truth no one tells you. You do not miss them. You miss the version of yourself that existed when they were near. You miss the way you felt, the lightness, the joy, the sense of connection, but that version of you is not lost, it is waiting to be found. Not in the past, not in someone else, but in the present moment. Zen teaches that true peace does not come from forgetting but from seeing clearly. See clearly now. You are not missing something outside of you. You are simply longing for the harmony you once felt. But that harmony was never them, it was within you all along. Stop searching. Stop replaying the song. Simply be. And in being, you will find that you were never incomplete, only unaware of the wholeness that was always there. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Which part of this teaching spoke to you the most? And if you wish to continue exploring the wisdom of Zen and Buddhist teachings, don't forget to subscribe and join me on this journey toward inner peace. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.